Zappa attempts to democratize wisdom. It attempts to take lessons where you take all of this wisdom that you've gathered that is a blend of both theory and practical application in the real world. And in our case, the way we put it together and teach it, ours complements in-person training and seminars and retreats and all that great stuff. That's all good to do, coaching, all good to do. But what we do is we package it into 3 to 5 minute little learning modules that are fun, highly gamified, and they string together into something we call an experience.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Conscious Capitalists with myself, Timothy Henry, and my partner in making the world a better place through business, Raj Dasodia. Hey there, Raj.
Hey, Timothy, I'm still in India.
You're still in India. Well, today we're going from the Silicon Valley of India, Bangalore, to the Silicon Valley of California with our special guest today, who's a longtime tech person in the Silicon Valley area, Christine Heckart. Hello, Christine.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon.
I want to start by introducing you. First of all, I want to thank you for being a speaker at our CEO Summit in October. And let me introduce you as the CEO of Xapa World and has experience on both sides of the board table. She brings over 25 years of experience in the technology industry. She's held a variety of leadership roles, including CEO, GM, president, and CMO in industries that include entertainment, software as a service, data analytics, security, networking, and storage. She's worked in B2C and B2B business models at companies ranging in size from one person to over 100,000, at iconic brands such as Microsoft, Cisco Systems, and NetApps. Having begun in new product development, her passion is in forging wholly new markets, and she's launched 3 of those. In addition, she was recently named one of the 50 most powerful women in technology by the National Diversity Council. And in 2016, she was a woman of influence by Silicon Valley Business Journal. Her passions in helping people and companies achieve more than they ever thought possible. She serves on the board of directors for SI Time and Contentful, and previously for Lam Research, Scalar, and 65 Cents. And last but not least, she's been married for 35 years, which is in and of itself a major accomplishment for most of us. With 3 grown children, she writes, paints, and follows leading science research in her spare time. She's a graduate in economics from the University of Colorado Boulder, where she graduated magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa. Christine, thank you for joining us today. Hello.
Hello. Well, that's more than anybody needs or cares to know about me. So I'm
Oh, well, when you have a brilliant guest, you want to make sure the world knows how brilliant she really is. And maybe begin with telling us a little bit about your latest venture, Xapa World, and what that's all about, and what was the origin story there for you?
Well, I have spent 35 years in tech, and I spent a lot of it as a young person running around the world helping to roll out early internet services. And, we had a dream at that time that all of this connectivity was going to bring the world together, and giving people publishing platforms would allow all of us to understand each other better. And, we were naive, obviously, and didn't predict the echo chambers that have resulted, that have created so much more division. And my whole career has been in deep tech, so networking and storage and data analytics and things like that. So after the successful exit of my last company, I originally had thought I might retire. I had been through a fabulous program led by Raj Sisodia, started by him and Hitesh Shah with BDO, building off the Conscious Capitalist Institute's teaching and called Conscious Business Leaders Academy. And it takes the principles of conscious capitalism and it teaches it to CEOs. And I had gone through that program. I'd been very, very inspired by it. Like so many of the leaders who join CCI, You hear people say over and over again, "Oh my god, I didn't realize that there was a name for this thing I've been, trying to practice my whole life. I didn't realize that other people were trying to do the same things." At the CCI summit, you hear that over and over again, and that's exactly the way I felt as soon as Raj started talking and talking about conscious capitalism. I had been an economics major in college, so I'm a big believer in capitalism, but I also, 35 years in tech, I have firsthand understanding and experience with its faults and, the ways that it could be better, both for employees as well as for the world at large. And so after an exit from the last company, my thought was to retire, but I got really inspired to try to do something whereby technology could play a positive role in people's lives, not a negative role, bring people together, not drive them apart, and where it could play a very positive role in business. And in fact, one early investor told me that the idea for this company, it's called Zappa, which means joy in Greek. He says it'll never work. This company will fail. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, because you're not dealing with one of the 7 deadly sins." And we made it clear from the beginning that we wanted this business to be for businesses, but eventually go to consumers, because that's the way you get, global impact in billions of people. And if we want to help each person become the best version of themselves, which is what Zap is all about. You develop both personally and professionally by being on the gamified app. Then we needed to go consumer. And he said, it'll never work because the only thing that's successful with consumer is something that deals with at least one of the 7 deadly sins, greed and vice and whatever, I don't know, vanity, whatever the deadly
Don't
sins are.
forget lust.
Yeah, lust. Um, and he's like, "Your entire platform is about the opposite of all of them. You're trying to help people be the best version of themselves, and the only things that succeed profitably are the ones that are the worst." And, I really took that as a personal challenge. I'm like, "This is BS." I do believe that business can and should be a force for good in the world and in people's lives. Zappa is proof of that that can be the case, and I hope it is, soon massive proof that you can have a profitable business and do good in the world, even with technology, not with other things, not healthcare or something like that, but with technology. And so ultimately, there were lots of reasons to start Zappa, but that was a really big impetus.
Wow, I love it. And in some ways, when I look back across some of the interviews you've done and the roles that you've played, one theme that comes across is your focus on an engaged, high trust culture and building that wherever you go. And I'm really curious, after 35 years and really honing your game on this, you've now started your latest company. What are some of the 2 or 3 things that, boil down to core lessons about how to build a culture that you're bringing to bear now with all of that experience?
Well, one of the things we do to just first take a broad look at that question, and then I can go deep. But the broad look is Zappa attempts to democratize wisdom. It attempts to take lessons that not only I've learned of 35 years, but Raj and Dr. Neha Sangwan and other authors and experts that we work with, where you take all of this wisdom that you've gathered that is a blend of both theory and practical application in the real world, and you put it together. And in our case, the way we put it together and teach it, and there's lots of ways to do this. Ours complements in-person training and seminars and retreats and all that great stuff. That's all good to do. Coaching, all good to do. But what we do is we package it into 3 to 5 minute little learning modules that are fun, highly gamified, and they string together into something we call an experience. So each of those tiny little quests becomes an experience, and you can take experiences on things like how to build a culture of accountability, how to build a culture of trust, how to assess trust in other people. So, for example, trust is one of the 5 competencies that are most associated with high-performing teams and individuals, and we call
Mhm.
those the high 5. And in fact, when you join Zappa, we start most people on the high 5 program. How do you develop the 5 competencies? So trust is one of the 5. There are 4 ways that people build and assess trust, and so we teach people the 4 components, which, by the way, are affinity, uh, reliability, competence, with vulnerability being kind of the underlying element that you need in order to build trusted relationships. But everything we do has a framework like that, and it has a little handout so people like me, when they can't remember one of them, can get back to it really quickly to say, what? How do I assess trust? How are people assessing trust in me? And, so the other part of the high 5 besides trust are self-awareness, self-control, which is I can't control the world, I can control how I respond. It's resilience and growth mindset, adaptability, positivity, skills like that. Self-care, which isn't, "Hey, I gotta go, have spa days every week." It's how do I make daily choices that allow me to be at my best, both mentally and physically, and then bring that person to work every day or bring that person to my family every day. And then the last one is communications, how I trust and or how I communicate with myself, how I communicate with others, how I trust myself in the case of trust, how I trust others. So those are the high 5. And we don't stop there. We teach things like manager excellence. How do I have good at one-on-ones with people and get them engaged? And that's about letting them be empowered to ask the questions they need to be successful, but it's also about asking them questions like, "How are you doing? Are you learning? Where are you challenged? Where are you frustrated? How can I help you?" Things that where do you see yourself in 5 years? How do we build a path to help you get there? Those sorts of things from a manager are going to create a culture of engagement and loyalty with your people. We have a whole leadership class, and we teach that before leaders can catalyze change, they have to model the right behaviors. They have to inspire their people to show up in the right way and believe in the higher
Yeah.
purpose, very
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
capitalism oriented. So all of these things, this wisdom that we all have, the teaching that Raj and CCI does, the things you talk about in the How To Institute at CTI or at CCI, all of those things come together and we try to deliver them in ways that are fun and engaging so that leaders can build the kind of culture that they want for their company.
Well, I love that. I love that. Obviously, that's absolutely in line with the things Raj and I talk about. And Christina, I'm always curious. I mean, like what got you to this point where you would stop and say, "Hey, this is really important to get it out to the world," because that implies a certain level of awareness, a certain growth trajectory you've been on as a leader. And how would you describe that growth trajectory that you've been on that got you to this place?
Well, I can tell you when I was first out of college, I started my first job at a company called Wiltel, which was a telecom provider. And my job ended up being to launch new products. Um, the world's first frame relay product, the first managed internet working service with Cisco, putting a router on the end of a device so that others didn't have to do that. Like, you just got it. Nobody had to figure it out. Um, and I was really good at defining and rolling out products, but my IQ was definitely higher than my EQ. And I had an attitude that, "Hey, get on the bus or get out of the way, but if you stand in the way, I'm probably just gonna run you over. Like, I'm not gonna stop and say, "Why are you standing in my way? Let's have a conversation. I wanna understand why, you're raising all of these objections." I had a job, and I did the job. I was really good at it. My CEO loved me. But not all of my peers probably loved me as I reflect back. Fast forward, to my time with CBLA and learning about CCI and conscious capitalism. By then, obviously, I had evolved. I was a CEO. I had developed some level. But going through that program, every single thing that Raj and Neha and all of the trainers taught, my thought was, one, I need everybody in the employee base to know this. This is not just a message for me at the CEO level or even just the C-suite. These are lessons for every person to have. How do we communicate well? How do we build trust together? How do we develop resilience? How do we find higher purpose? All of these things. But I also really needed them in my 20s and my 30s. That would have made me a better employee for my employer and for my colleagues. And I would have still got stuff done, but I would have done it in a different way. And it would have been better for everybody involved. So that was kind of my breakthrough. I didn't need to work anymore, but I didn't necessarily want to retire yet. And this was a way to take 35 years of experience in tech, but use it to try to create ripples of positivity and conscious capitalism out into the world.
Well, Christine, you've done pretty darn well. I can imagine if you had all of this in addition to what you already knew. It's hard to imagine where else you would have been right now. But I have to, for full disclosure, I am an investor in Zappa, or a shareholder in Zappa, certainly, and our content is going to be in there. So, and I love the tagline. If you want to share the tagline with our audience.
Yes. For consumers, what we say is we help you get more than money. We help you get filthy enriched. And it really is about enriching each part, any part, all the parts of your life, professionally and personally. Can be financially, but we're teaching more about how to align the way you earn and spend your money with your own values and your purpose. How do you get soul value, not just material value, out of money and out of work? And then we teach a lot, like I said, about your emotional health, your physical, your intellectual health, curiosity, and all the things that make us a whole being. For companies, the way we translate that for a company is to say, we help you grow the people who grow the business. Because we've seen through a lot of research, particularly since COVID, some really great research that was done by a behavioral scientist named John Levy, that the reasons why people work have changed a lot over the last 150 years. And if you can tap into people's why of work, you can really unleash enormous potential, engagement, innovation, accountability, performance, productivity, all the things that you want as an employer. But if you don't tap into that why of work, and there's some pretty basic things, they don't cost a lot of money, they just take some attention. If you can tap into that why, you're going to have a more engaged workforce. If you don't, you're going to have what is today's average workforce, which is 68% disengaged, and over 65% of people either looking for a new job actively or considering it. And, then they're not all that engaged with your company. And that's not good for any company.
So, Christine, I've gotten to know you pretty well, I would say, over the last 4 or 5 years now since you joined the CBLA program, and we've worked together on various aspects of Zappa. And one of the things I've admired about you is your empathetic leadership and your creativity as well. And I know there's a story that we often use in our programs about how to handle challenging times and do it in a creative and empathetic way. And I'm referring to the situation where you had to let some people go, and how you chose to handle that. I think is kind of it's like an object lesson in how to do these things. So if you could just share that experience.
Yeah, that was That was a tough one. I was CEO of a company called Scalar. It was a data analytics platform, and it was venture-backed. And, COVID really decimated our business. We lost half of our revenue, within a couple of months. We had a lot
Mm,
of revenue that came out of Southeast Asia, and all around the world. We had a high percentage of revenue that was associated with the travel industry, with the rideshare industry, with all the industries that sort of just came to a massive halt, because of COVID. And because we're venture backed, that massive reduction in revenue, um, came with a big increase in our burn rate. And we had gone from having literally 6, 7, 8 years worth of burn rate, depending on how we decided to deploy capital, to having a year of burn rate, left with cash in the bank. So it was a massive swing because we had been mostly profitable up until that time, just kind of right on the edge. And then all of a sudden we were burning a lot of money. And, we were also right in the process of launching a brand new version of the product so that we could take it to the next level. But, I had been at dinner, one night, in early March with some customers in the UK, and they had flown over, and we took them out to dinner, and on my way driving home from dinner, I turned the news on, and I heard 2 things. And I had COVID had been around. I knew we had everything was going downhill in Asia, but in the US, we hadn't shut the economy down yet. And so I still had people in the office. I'm like, "Yeah, this is a flu. Get your butt in the office. We got a platform to launch in mid-April." And this is like March 10th or something like that. But on the news, it said that President Trump at the time and was getting ready to ban travel to and from Europe. So my customers now had like 48 hours to get themselves home. And that woke me up a little bit, but I was still like, wow, that seems kind of drastic. But then the very next story was that the NBA had decided to cancel the rest of their season. And I was flabbergasted. First of all, I'm a big Warriors fan, so that was disappointing. But it was like, the NBA is gonna cancel the season? Like, that is unprecedented. And so I went home, I sent a before I went to bed that night, I sent a missive out to my, key executives, and I said, Tomorrow we're gonna sit down and we're gonna plan the impact of COVID on this company because I'm very worried." And
mm,
ultimately, what transpired in the next 2 weeks is I decided to lay off 15% of the workforce.
mm.
And nobody was really in favor of that at the time except my, investors, but, it was absolutely the right thing to do because without that, we would have run out of money in less than 12 months, and with that, I would have been able to get another, probably 8 months out of the business, which was enough time to recover from whatever I thought was going to happen, and
Yeah.
nobody knew how long COVID was going to last. The problem with that is back to the conscious capitalist thing. Like, how do you all right, I knew what the number was because the math gave me the number, but we had to figure out the people, and we had to figure out the right way to do it, and we had a big launch that was coming up in 6 weeks. And so once I, fought with my own people about the necessity of this, then the thought was, "Oh, well, we're gonna wait until after the launch to tell people."
Mm,
And my thought was, "You can't do that.
mm.
We're gonna ask these people to
Yeah.
work really, really hard over the next 6 weeks, and that's duplicitous." So, what we ultimately did is we created a package for the people who were being laid off that was very, very generous, especially for a company of our size. But we not only gave them severance, we also gave them extended COBRA, and we gave them 6 months of extended stock vesting. So we
Mm.
pulled forward their stock vesting, and our rationale was they were going to help us create value they already had. We didn't know what was going to happen to the company. It might have gone bankrupt. It might have shut down. Lots of startups did. But we would know that it was succeeding or failing with the package. And not only did we accelerate their stock by 6 months, we gave them an entire year to exercise their stock, which usually you have 3 months or less to exercise. So it was very generous. And I was moving so fast, the board was happy to say yes because they had bigger problems elsewhere with their portfolio. But then it's how do we tell these people? And so I'm a big believer that clarity is kindness. In fact, we teach that in Zappa, how to be both clear and kind.
Mm.
And that in any situation, the number one thing is to protect human dignity and self-esteem. These people did nothing wrong, but we couldn't keep them. And so what we ultimately did is we first met with each of the people that was staying. We told them that times were going to get tough. We gave them some extra stock, and we hoped that they would want to stay. But if they didn't want to, we wanted to be the first to know so that we could work with them. Then we met individually with the people who were being laid off. They didn't find out in an email or something like that. They found out through their boss
This is
with somebody with two people on to tell them. And we basically explained what was going to happen to them, and we gave them a choice. They could walk out the door right then, and they could not only get the entire severance package that we were offering, but we would also extend the severance so that we were paying them the same way we were everybody else through the launch. Or they could choose to stay. They would work through the launch, and then their severance package would happen. We didn't have one person choose to leave. Even the laid off people stayed. They got us through the launch, and it was important because, in a launch, every day, every piece of energy is critical, and if somebody's not gonna give their all, then that's gonna jeopardize all of the other people. So we just wanted to know, for your colleagues' sake, if you don't wanna stay, if you don't wanna work, say so we can plan accordingly. Every single person stayed. In the end, the company had a very successful exit, and it's in part because of the work those people did. And the people who left were able to get out fast enough that they all landed jobs. And in fact, one of the things we told everybody in the company is we showed them a chart. We had an all hands, and we included all the people that were leaving and all the people who were staying. And we showed them the chart of what the layoff did to the burn rate and therefore our ability to survive. And two interesting things happened after we executed the layoff. One, almost every employee that got laid off sent me a note. I sent them all personal notes of thanks and gratitude, and almost all of them sent me back a note, and they said, "We agree with the layoff." And most of them even said, "I agreed that I'm the right person given what the company has to do." We had many people say it's the best layoff experience they ever had, which is a terrible compliment. But, most people have been laid off before, and we did it in a very humane way. But the two things that make me most proud about that, is many of those employees ended up becoming customers. They went into other companies and they brought us in. In fact, we got $1 million deal from one of them, which was a big turning point in the success and survival of the company, and big six-figure deals from others. The other thing is that every one of those employees participated in a very significant way in the exit of the company, and the exit of the company made all of those people quite wealthy, good, at least put their kids through college, and, and they got to participate because they helped to create the value that allowed us to get to that point.
I love it. That's such a beautiful story, Christine. And I'm curious because, clearly, both from your personal leadership style and from what you're doing with Zappa, this idea of building high trust, high engagement cultures, you live it and you're trying to reinforce it. And one of the things I'm fascinated by, and I'd love to hear your experience on this, because certainly it's popular in Silicon Valley, is our employees are our most important asset, and they walk out the door every day. And it's like, yeah. And the say do gap is pretty big. So, we all say that. And yet, the doing, there's a big gap there. And I'm curious, longtime Silicon Valley person, what's that all about?
You're right, and the one thing that I forgot on trust was integrity, which is say do. Integrity in business isn't about, are you moral? Are you ethical? That's a good thing, and I believe in ethical businesses. But integrity in business is really about, do I say what I'm going to do, and then do I do what I just said? And if
Mm,
my actions and words are aligned, people can trust me to have integrity.
yeah.
And so, yeah, so there are, big gaps, and sometimes those gaps are just misunderstanding, but often it's because leaders don't really walk the talk. And that's one of the biggest things that creates disengagement and trust issues in the workforce. And so, how do we do that? Well, we start by having leaders model, what it is
Yeah.
they're saying. You just have to do what you say. Just be
Yeah.
careful what you say. One of the things that the research is showing us is what engaged employees have is they have personal value that they're extracting out of their experience at their job. And that personal value might be growth, which is one of the number one things that young people, especially people in their 20s and 30s, want. They want personal and professional growth. In technical terms, they want to move up Maslow's hierarchy. They don't wanna wait, like we were all told in college, Maslow's hierarchy is something that happens slowly over the course of your life, and as you self-actualize and get to the top in your 50s and your 60s, then you start living into higher purpose and living into values and giving back to others, and you're self-actualized, you're at the top of the hierarchy, and basically, young people are saying, "Yeah, yeah, that's all good, we want that now." We don't wanna wait until we're in our 50s and 60s to live our values and our purpose and to be self-actualized, to have self-esteem and self-confidence and all of these technical terms that we know and we want sooner. And, oh, by the way, employer, we want your help to get there. And unfortunately, most companies don't do that kind of training today. They don't bring in the Conscious Capitalist Institute to help, uplift and train their employees on the soft skill side, on the personal side. They'll do hard skill training, maybe, but
Mm,
if you came into business last century into any kind of big company, you got training in personal hygiene, for God's sakes. You got training in why it's important to show up to work on time and how to communicate with other people and how to read body language. Companies don't do that training anymore, very, very few. And yet that's exactly what they're asking for is help me understand how to show up in the right way in my life, for myself, for others. So that's a big one. Companies who help people self-actualize, help them move up Maslow's hierarchy, grow personally and professionally, they get very engaged, loyal employees. Employees also want to be seen and appreciated. One of the nicest compliments I got from a Scalar employee who was an engineer, um, absolutely on the spectrum, incredibly shy. I don't think he said 2 words to me in 2 years of working together. But, when he left the company, he gave me a handwritten note, and he said, "This is the first time I've ever felt seen." And it's simply because I would stop and ask him how he was doing and, tell him when he did a good job. Um, so people want to be seen, they want to be appreciated authentically for the work that they do. These are simple things. They don't take that much more time. They don't take that much more energy. In fact, it's the opposite. They give you back energy, and sometimes they give you back time because an engaged employee workforce is going to save you as a company and as a leader so much more time. At Zappa, I'll give you a great example. We employ Hollywood writers, and they take material like from Raj's books and Neha's books and CCI, wherever, and they turn it into these fun, interactive scripts. Well, our employees came to me and they said, we could be doing this so much better. Like, if we did this instead of that, we have this idea. We want to take our characters and we want to use them in a slightly different way. We want to reorient the way we work with the experts and create this kind of middle process. It'll be efficient. That's awesome. Like, that's what all you want from leaders is you want your employees in their spare time thinking about how do we make this better, and then having the courage and creating enough of a safe environment where people can say, I don't think it's working as well as it should. It could be so much better. And once you say yes to that, it's hard to say no. It's like, yeah, that all sounds like the right thing to do. Let's go do it. Their ability to lean into their jobs then is so much higher because now they have control over their own destiny. And that's what people want. They don't want to be empowered. You can't empower other people. We talk about all the time empowerment, like you're giving somebody permission
Mm. Mm.
to take control of their life. But if you create empowered environments where people feel like part of their job is to think, not just do. We pay you to think. Part of their job is to identify problems and solutions. Part of their job is to bring that forward and to innovate and to help the company be better. They have the power. They have to take it. I can't give it to them. Empowerment isn't me giving you power. It's me giving you the environment, the culture, the permission to take your own power and use it. And when people have the chance to do that, their energy fills up. Dr. Neha Sangwan has a book called Powered by Me. And that's a lot of it. It's like, how do I create my power in all of the areas of my life that help me bring my best self into my work and my family?
Christine, you had a long career and you're still very young. And so there's still a lot, I think, that you're going to do, and you certainly got Zappa now, and that's going to make a difference and a big impact. But beyond that, what do you see now as your purpose for this chapter? For me, it's the third act now, right? I mean, the first two acts are done, and what do you see as building towards a legacy? What do you look to do there?
Well, that's a lovely question. Thank you. Zappa really was started with a legacy play. That was a written purpose, and it is to help each person become the best version of themselves, personally and professionally. Um, I hope we can touch every person on the planet directly or indirectly, spread the messages of conscious capitalism, help people move up Maslow's hierarchy, and give them the self-esteem and self-confidence that they can send ripples of positivity into the world. When we don't feel good about ourselves, then we tend to send ripples of negativity out. And the minute we each feel enough, we feel that we are enough, then we begin to have enough to spread to other people and to do random acts of kindness and to support people and to be kind. Um, I once heard compassion defined as understanding what somebody else needs most from you and being willing to give it to them. And it might be what they need is just empathy and understanding. They might need forgiveness. They might need support. They might need that, you to say you feel proud of them. Whatever that is, that's really compassion. So a more compassionate society is a society where each one of us has enough ourselves. We feel like we are enough, that we have the ability to give of ourselves to others in an unselfish way. Not talking money, doesn't matter. Money really doesn't matter in a compassionate world. Might include that, but generosity is about so much more than that. And so what I hope my legacy is with Zappa is I hear the kinds of things across the world that we hear from our early users, which are very simple things. Just things like, I have a better relationship with my spouse, my kids, my parents, because I've learned how to listen. I've learned how to forgive. I've learned how to give something of myself and be vulnerable. People, we wrap ourselves in armor every day. And it's hard, it's scary for some people to be vulnerable. So my only goal is to really make the world a little bit better for each human on it, and to make each person feel better about themselves. Zappa has characters, and so uh, every character actually has exactly the same form. And so you can't look any different than me in Xapa World. Maybe you have hair, I don't have hair. Maybe you have glasses, I don't have glasses, but every character looks the same. And the reason for that is we teach that it's all of this wrapping that we put around ourselves is not the authentic us. Deep down, we're all the same. We want the same things. We want to be loved. We want to be appreciated and seen, and we want to have a chance to make positive impact. And if we can help each person do that, we will have done our job.
That was beautiful, Christine. I really love the way you've described that. And I'm curious, as a father of a daughter, and I know you're a mother of a couple daughters, um, in particular for our young women growing up and moving potentially into the tech world or into tech-related world, um, you know, what advice do you give them in terms of things you wish you knew when you were their age that would have helped you, one, be a better leader, and two, succeed more in a world where sometimes they might feel like they're swimming a little bit against the tide? Um, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
The world in tech and elsewhere is a different world than when I came into the industry. And by the way, the industry and the world I experienced was different and better than the women who came in 10 years before. So it is a better world. We have made a lot of progress. You don't get the kind of toxic environments typically that I have personally experienced. But my advice to the young women is actually the same as to the young men. And we're fortunate these days that many of the young men are much more in touch with themselves than and allowed to be, thanks to courageous leaders like Raj and his book Awaken, and people like you,
Yeah.
Timothy. Like people have more permission to be authentic now in the world,
Mm.
including in the work world, male or female, or trans or bi, all good, non-binary. Um, the thing that I wish I would have known earlier, and I had a lot of courage as a young person. In fact, in some ways, too much. My CEO used to say what he liked about me is I knew that everybody put their pants on one leg at a time. And I never knew what that meant. I'm like, what's he talking about? And it was kind of a backhanded compliment because what he was referring to, I still, years later, still, talk to him knowing that um, I really didn't I wasn't respectful of titles. I didn't understand corporate hierarchy. I just understood who you were as a human. And I treated everybody the same, regardless of their power, their position, their money, whatever. That's a good thing, but there's also downside to that when you're a young person in business. But what I wish I would have had is the confidence to be more of myself after getting feedback. So,
Mm.
feedback is a two-edged sword,
Mhm.
and many managers are very well intended in giving feedback, and it's an important part of growing. It's part, and having the courage to ask for feedback and take feedback and authentically grow from it. That's important. There are also many times when you get feedback that for me, I'm an overachiever. So somebody gives me feedback, I want to do what they just said. And one of the things I look back on is I'm so adaptable. I'm so growth minded that when somebody says left, I can go left. And when they say right, I can go right. And I can be, I'll try to be the best at whatever the thing is that you're pointing me towards. And not all the advice I got over that time was actually good advice looking
Mm.
back. Every manager wanted me to be a version of them, but I wasn't them. They are them. And just now, I feel like, in part thanks to CBLA and learning about conscious leadership, I finally feel like I have permission. I'm giving myself permission because I realize it's a thing now, it has a name. I can lead the way I wanna lead, which is conscious
Mm,
leadership.
mm,
I didn't have that permission in my 20s and my 30s, and I didn't have the language for it, and so I was always being shaped by other people and trying to fit and trying to succeed by that set of rules that was in whatever culture I was in, and there's good to that. Like, you have
yeah.
to adopt and adapt culturally, but at the same time, you have to be authentically true to yourself and what you know is right and living into that more, and had I given myself that permission sooner and really had I understood that there was a thing called conscious capitalism sooner, I feel like I would have been a better colleague, a better leader, a better entrepreneur sooner in my life. And, I'll stop in a second, but so many young people in this country and around the world do not trust business. They don't trust business and they don't trust capitalism. And I truly feel and one of the impetuses for Zappa, because we're targeted at young people ultimately, people in their 20s and 30s who want a gamified app to learn stuff. We want them to know that there is a way to do business that is in alignment with their values and their goals in life and their purpose, their higher purpose. And I think when that comes together for people, I wish I had had it earlier. I'm glad I have it now. If we can get it to people sooner,
Yeah.
then I think it's gonna give them permission to be in business and love business and exceed in business, like John Mackey talks about in his book. These 2 things can come together in a way that, sometimes they don't, but they can. We have permission to do that.
Well, Christine, I've noticed about you that you're very well rounded. Uh, you take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc. And you're not, I don't think, in any danger of burnout, even though you work incredibly hard. I know that. And so, talk to us about some of your outside activities and interests. Like, you like to write, you like to paint, and tell us how that helps you be fresh, be creative, be excited about life. Talk about some of those outside interests that you have outside of the office.
So I do paint a very large acrylic canvas. I have 3 grown children. Most of them don't live close by, so I don't get to spend a lot of time with them, but, still, definitely a side hobby. Get a lot of, um, enjoyment from seeing them grow into highly conscious individuals who completely live in alignment with their values, and I'm
Mm,
super proud to see that. They didn't need somebody to give them permission. They took it early and they run with it. I have a daughter who's a vegan, and I have a daughter who's all about water resourcing, and a son who works in the life sciences field. And it's all about, trying to make the world better the way they live their lives. So super proud of that. You talk about balance. I'm very much about longevity. How do we live a long, healthy life by making good choices? In fact, we try to teach that in Zappa. I wish I would have had it sooner. But because I've been in toxic environments over much of my career, and toxic, they weren't, these companies weren't trying to be mean to me. Um, it was just the way business was, and the environment was, the way it was at these companies. But I have probably what'll end up being lifetime, but at least long term currently, health impacts from that. So, I get AFibs, and
mm,
I'm not overweight, I'm not diabetic. There's not a single reason in the world for my heart to go into AFibs, and it'll do it at ridiculously weird moments. Like,
yeah.
there's no reason for it. There's no trigger for it. I'm not stressed out. I have a wonderful life now. I'm, living completely into my work really hard, like Raj says. I work a lot of hours, but it's all aligned with joy. And it's just PTSD. Like, I know it's in my head. It's a limbic system overreaction. Dr. Neha would say, it's a amygdala hijack in some way. Like, it's the PTSD in my body. We all have that. We store in our bodies every positive and negative memory. And if we don't learn to release that, so I've learned to meditate. I've learned to really pay attention to my physical body and how I'm feeling, because when you're an executive in tech or probably any industry, your superpower is you can ignore every signal from your body to get your work done. You don't have time to be tired. You don't have time to be nervous or anxious. You got to get this done. Never let them see you sweat. And that's it. And for 35 years, I ignored every possible signal that my body was sending me and my mind was sending me. And I was successful. You can't be in the middle of a board meeting and then you got to go to the bathroom. No, like, you power through whatever it is. And so I'm really learning to um, be more mindful and listen to my body. And I still I treat these AFibs as sort of a gift because it reminds me that I have to be very conscious and I have to really take care of myself very holistically. And I find a lot of joy in work, but some days I wake up, especially on the weekends, I will wake up and say, my job today, I have to say it that way because that's the way I'm wired. My
It's
job today is to do nothing.
mm,
Or many weekends I can't do nothing or I don't want to do nothing. It's boring to do nothing for too long. But I'll say, I'm not going to work on Zappa for at least 6 hours today. That's my job, right? I'm going to take 6 hours and completely unplug. And then again, it's back to giving myself permission, but then that becomes my job. And then I do that job really well. Like I throw myself at painting or taking a walk. I try to walk the dog every day. I work out, but that becomes my job.
well, that leads to an interesting question. The other day we were talking with someone and they were talking about, people talking about the corporate athlete. And, let's think of yourself as a corporate athlete who's trying to be fit and so they can play at their game. And one of the reflections I had was having had a son who was an international athlete for a while. It's like, you're not at your best every day. You don't push to the limit every day. There are periods where you have to restore and you work hard, and then you have restoration periods. And there's seasons during the course of the year when you're pushing this and other times when you're pushing that. And so I found and I find this idea of, well, we're corporate athletes to be really a nonsense phrase. Um, and again, I'm sort of curious as to, again, when we advise our children, what do we go to say, hey, we need to take care of yourself. You need to be at your best. You got to find this balance because the world is going to be asking you to work really hard because here's a moment in time when you're in a startup and you've got to get stuff done because that's what you need to do and take care of yourself.
That's so true. Everything you said, I agree with. For 35 years, I was the corporate athlete. And I loved it so much that the fact that I was working, 60 to 80 hours a week, and having 3 kids and all of that, that didn't bother me. Like, I loved it. I was learning. I was growing. I could do it all. But then I have then I have AFibs. That is a result of overdoing it for too long, never letting my parasympathetic nervous system, like, really be off. So I do believe we need a balance. This is a big part of what I've learned, now what I try to practice, what we try to teach. Um, but you can also take it too far. Like my 3 kids, they look at me and they're like, never going into tech. You work too hard. I don't want to be you. And I don't blame them. I could see why they
Oh.
want to be. I was finding joy in it, but you gotta align with purpose. But I think this is one of the big problems that businesses are struggling with right now with employees is there is the right balance. You do need to take care of yourself and you can't be pedal to the metal back in the days of gas all the time. Or I guess even with my electric car, you can go fast. You can't be on full all the time. You have to have balance, but you can't be successful and move up in business and have successful businesses if everybody's just phoning it in, if everybody thinks like a renter, not an owner, if everybody's just truly, 9 to 5. You need people who are truly invested and willing to give extra, But then you also need people to take care of themselves. And I think where we're at in business right now is each business is trying to find that balance. And it's never like we're tipping too far one way or too far the other. We might be over rotating in some ways. So how does each person has to find it for themselves, to your
Yeah.
point, but you do want to be able to give your best, to push through, to be at your peak. And to do that, there are times when you have to restore. Take those times on the weekend. Does that mean you never answer an email on the weekend? Maybe not. Probably depends on your job and your own choices and where you want to get in life. But there are these trade-offs, and we can't have it all. Um, I feel like I pretty much had it all most of my life, but then here's this little tax that I now have to pay. So now I have to go
Mm.
back and I have to like figure out how to restore that and pay back that tax. But I do agree with what you're saying. It's finding balance and harmony, and for each person it's different. But boy, if you're aligned with higher purpose and values and you're finding joy in the work because you're growing, it never feels like work.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, it's interesting because you've played both sides of the board, right? You've been CEO and you're on boards. And I'm really curious about how do you take your philosophy about culture and engagement into the boardroom, and um, how do you play that game, and where are you in that world in terms of that kind of influence?
Well, that's such a great question because in many ways, the law, the letter of the law, Delaware law at least, international law gets different, but the law is not on our side as conscious board members because conscious capitalism is about looking out for all stakeholders and optimizing the outcome for all stakeholders. Now, if you've read Raj's book on conscious capitalism, then you know that the companies who look out for all stakeholders actually outperform on a shareholder basis 2 to 1 over a 20-year period. And ethical companies outperform 1.5 to 1 compared to not only the S&P, but also good to great companies. So the law should be on our side because clearly shareholders benefit significantly when companies and boards look out and optimize for outcomes for all stakeholders and not narrowly focusing on shareholder. And, Raj teaches the history of how we got here through Milton Friedman, I think, but, here's where we are. So I not only sit on boards, I teach board governance through the Next Gen Directors Academy at Berkeley. And one of my self-proclaimed roles in teaching governance is to bring up in every board training program that we do this idea of how to be a conscious board member. And I'm clear about the tension with the way law is written and interpreted. And I'm also clear about how the evidence is on our side. And if you believe that evidence and you do want to really do your fiduciary duty, then as a board member, you are representing all stakeholders in the boardroom, not only outside shareholders, which means as board members, we need to ask about how a policy impacts employees, how we're thinking about developing people and internal succession planning, which has, by the way, become much more prevalent in the boardroom than what it has ever been, certainly last century and, the last 5 years, it's really improved. We have to also ask about partners and suppliers. How are we treating them? Are we treating them with integrity? We have to understand how we operate in communities and what our footprint is in the world. How much do we extract from the world versus how much do we give back? Those are all important board conversations. The average board, there's not a committee on any of that. There's not a statutory committee for it, but it does relate to risk. It does relate to return. And as board members, we have to have the courage to raise those issues. Good CEOs are willing to lean into them. And If your company is not, then that tells you something about whether that's the right board for you to be on, or it gives you an opportunity to influence and change minds.
Well, Christine, I think, your alignment with the principles of conscious capitalism and your embodiment as a leader, I think really make it critical that you be part of this movement at a deeper level, not just in running Zappa, which you're doing, but I think your advice and your guidance, I think, are very important for us moving forward as you have scaled things in the past, and that's something we're looking to do now. We really need to scale conscious capitalism, and you're a CEO who has seen the power of this, who has learned about some of these principles, and so I look forward to you helping us over the years spread these ideas for the betterment of everybody.
Well, I am so, so grateful to Conscious Capitalist Institute. The work you're doing is incredible. Every CEO of every size business in every country around the world needs to understand it. Many of them will now see that they have permission to lead the way they always wanted to. And so it's just opening that door. It's not going to be everybody, but it's a lot of people. I am fortunate. I do a lot of public speaking. I'm part of a lot of different communities of professionals, board members, CEO groups, et cetera. And I feel so blessed to have been given this gift from CCI. And so I talk about it all the time. I'm proud to talk about it. I think it's a gift to the world. And those people who recognize it and accept it, they immediately take that gift and they start using it. So all you have to do is show them that it's there. It's not about teaching anybody. It's just about really, opening that door and giving them the language.
I love it. I love it. Well, we will pull you in increasingly closer, as you and I have spoken about. So thank you so much for your time and your energy and the example that you are, Christine. You're a wonderful spokesperson for leading in a different way. And the world's never needed this kind of leadership more than it needs now. So thank you so much for joining us today and for all you do.
Thank you. Thank you for the gift of CCI. It has changed my life, and I hope I can work with you and have it change others at massive scale.
And thank you to our listeners. And if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please share it with your friends. And on whatever channel you're listening, please hit the subscription button. And if you have any thoughts or comments, please go over to iTunes and Apple and leave us your comments, your thoughts, and give us a score. And as always, thank you to Conscious Capitalism, Inc. for being our sponsor for today's podcast, and to Rainbow Productions for helping us get this done well. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week.